Hello, my name is Stephanie Garner, and I'm the program coordinator at Down Syndrome Indiana. And this is your Live, Laugh, Dance Down Syndrome Indiana volunteer orientation video. We are so excited that you're joining us, whether you are joining us for another year of Live, Laugh, Dance, or this is your first year, maybe. We know you're going to have a great time, and we're really glad to have you involved. So, we're going to do just a quick orientation video to share some information with you. And hopefully we will be able to give you lots of helpful information. Give me 1 second and we are going to get going. Okay, so again, we are really excited that you are participating with us. The first thing that you need to keep in mind when you are volunteering with us is that the language that you use is incredibly important. We recommend that you use person-first language when interacting with people with disabilities. We all know that language can be incredibly powerful and helpful, or it can be hurtful. So we want to make sure that we are using language that is promoting the value and worthiness of individuals with Down syndrome. So we're going to put the person before the disability. And what that looks like is instead of saying, oh, this is my Down syndrome friend, we're going to say, this is my friend with Down syndrome. Instead of saying, this is the blind girl, it's the girl who is blind. And when we do that, it just acknowledges the fact that a person is more than just a disability or a diagnosis. If I were going to tell you about my daughter, I have a 10-year-old daughter who has Down syndrome. If I was going to tell you about Lily, I would tell you that she's silly and funny and smart and loving and caring and sassy and stubborn. And I could go on and on and on telling you about how amazing this kid is. And at some point, I would get to the fact that she has Down syndrome, because she does. Down syndrome is a part of who she is, but that's all it is, just this one tiny part of the amazing person that she is. But when you call her a Down syndrome student or a Down syndrome friend, it's like you're putting her in this box with the Down syndrome label on it. And you're saying the only thing that's important about this person is the fact that they have Down syndrome. And when you do that, you miss out on all the other amazing things that that person brings to the table. So the language that you use really is important. We also want to acknowledge that disability is really just a medical diagnosis, and it doesn't define who a person is. When talking about or to folks with disabilities, we want to avoid using words like disabled or handicapped and instead say a person with a disability. Instead of defective or deformed, we want to say a person who has. And instead of physically challenged or suffers from, a person who has. People with Down syndrome don't suffer from Down syndrome. Down syndrome is just something that they have. Mentally retarded is a diagnosis that used to be used for people who had an IQ score below a certain number, but people took that word and they turned it into slang that means stupid, dumb, or ridiculous. And in 2012, that word was taken out of the medical guidelines and the legal guidelines. So it's no longer even used. Intellectual disability is a proper terminology. So you're going to refer to a person who has an intellectual disability. We don't want to say things like stricken with, a person with, or a person who has, right? That language that we use is very important. When you are working with an individual who has a cognitive or intellectual disability, there are several things we want to keep in mind. We want to make sure that we allow them enough time to learn and practice and master any new tasks. So that means it's going to take a lot of repetition. We never want to over assist someone with Down syndrome. There are going to be some things that some of our individuals might need a little bit of extra help with, but you want to make sure that that person asks you for assistance, or you ask them, hey, do you need some help with that, right? Because we don't want to be patronizing. We need to give our individuals a little bit of extra time with decision making. People with Down syndrome tend to have a delayed processing time. So that means that if I'm going to make a request of someone, I need to give them plenty of time to think that through. And I want to use language that's precise and maybe with fewer or simpler words. I wouldn't want to go into a huge, long, drawn out explanation. I want to use more simple language. You want to ask questions that require brief answers. If you are interacting with your buddy and they're not responding to maybe open-ended questions that you're asking them, like, what did you do today? You could try asking questions that have fewer answers. Maybe what did you have for dinner today? So the topic is a little bit more narrowed down. Or did your mom bring you today, or did your dad bring you today? Who's here with you? We also want to make sure that we're treating adults like adults. I often hear people say adults with Down syndrome are like little kids trapped in an adult body, and that's not true. Adults with Down syndrome are adults with adult thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So we want to make sure that we are being very respectful to them and treating them like the adults that they are. We want to make sure that we are flexible, patient, and supportive of our individuals. We want to take time to get to know that person and to let them know us. So that might mean talking to them about things they like outside of Live, Laugh, Dance, and really getting to know them. This next one is don't pretend to understand the person if you don't. We're actually going to talk a lot more about that on the next slide. If you're in an area that has a lot of distractions, sometimes it can be helpful to move to a quieter location if you're having trouble communicating with the individual that you're working with. Sometimes getting away from the loud noise and the visual distractions can help everyone focus a little bit better. When you're working with an individual who has a speech impairment, and most individuals with Down syndrome do have a speech impairment, you want to make sure that if you don't understand that person, that you don't pretend that you do. There are a lot of ways that you can help yourself to better understand them. So you can ask them to repeat what they just said. So maybe asking them to repeat it, speak more loudly, speak more slowly, and then you can paraphrase back to them what they said so that you can get confirmation. You can try asking questions that require yes or no answers or nodding their head. If that person is having trouble finishing their sentence or kind of getting stuck, you just want to give them some time to be able to answer that. Don't finish their sentence for them. And if you're having a lot of trouble understanding that person, you can consider alternate means for how they express themselves. One thing that they suggest is maybe consider using writing as an alternate means of communication. But you'll first want to talk to that individual and find out if that's a better method. One thing that I use a lot personally with my daughter is, can you show me? When my daughter says something and I don't understand it, I'll say, can you show me what it is you want, or what you're asking? Another thing that I use a lot professionally and personally with my daughter is if I'm interacting with a person with Down syndrome and I don't understand what they're saying, if their parent or caregiver is there, I'll oftentimes look to that person when the person with Down syndrome is done speaking, look to the parent or caregiver. And if you do it with the slight question in your eyes or raise your eyebrows, right? They're used to folks having trouble understanding their loved one. So very often that parent will jump in and kind of paraphrase what's said. I had this exact same situation happen at the doctor the other day. My daughter, again, is 10 and has a lot of trouble being understood. And we got to the doctor's office and the receptionist said, who's here to check in? And I say, can you tell her what your name is? And she said, Egar Hop. And what she was saying was Lily Garner and mom, but because of her speech problems, it came out sounding like Egar Hop. And so that poor woman had no idea. And she kind of looked at me with the raised eyebrows. And I said, yeah, good job. Lily Garner and mom are here. Nice job, Lily. So that way I wasn't I was paraphrasing what she said, and I was telling her what a great job she did saying all of that, and still giving the receptionist the answer that she needed. So look to the parent and caregiver if you're really struggling. Um, Special considerations when working with an individual with Down syndrome. Most individuals with Down syndrome have what we call hypotonia or low muscle tone. And that often means that basically individuals with Down syndrome can be incredibly strong, but they don't have a lot of core strength and core stability. Um, and then they can also have very hypermobile joints and joint laxity. So when you're doing flexibility exercises with an individual with Down syndrome, you probably don't need to push a lot of flexibility stuff because, really pushing that flexibility can lead to further joint laxity. So approach flexibility with some caution. Individuals with Down syndrome can also have what we call atlantoaxial instability, or a loosening of the ligaments between the first and second cervical vertebrae. And that can basically lead to the cervical vertebrae impinging on the spinal cord during certain activities and motions. So this is not common. It only happens in about 17% of individuals with Down syndrome. But individuals who do have atlantoaxial instability need to avoid like hyperflexion and hyperextension of the neck. And the activities that we're going to be doing in Live, Laugh, Dance are not going to be very dangerous for someone with atlantoaxial instability. Folks with atlantoaxial instability aren't supposed to jump on trampolines or play football or ride horses, things that could result in axial loading injuries. And then the last thing that we want to talk about is that individuals with Down syndrome typically have lower maximal heart rates and lower pulmonary function. So that means individuals with Down syndrome are going to be fatigued quicker than typically developing peers. So an individual with Down syndrome might need to break a little bit more often than a typically developing peer. And that is it for our very quick volunteer orientation. The number one rule of Live, Laugh, Dance is have fun. I feel very confident that you guys are going to go out there and really enjoy this. I know all of our individuals who participate in this program absolutely love it, and I think that you will too. Thank you so much. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to us at Down Syndrome Indiana or talk to Rachel Swinford, and she can give you some guidance. So thanks again, and have a wonderful Live, Laugh, Dance season.